Welcome to our first of probably many webinars on radiation, EMF, and all topics around that. I'm Gerard Bini from Orgone Effects Australia. Today's first webinar is on 5G, as you all know. Thank you for all of you, all 51 so far, for being participants. That's really good. Okay, 5G. It's the #1 trending topic at the moment. Yeah, everyone's talking about it now more than, say, 6 months ago, and there was a lot of people talking about it 6 months ago. 12 months ago, we went to Canberra to do our 5G testing on our products. And the reason we did that was we had no knowledge of actually how 5G worked. We had read things on the internet. We've seen a lot of fear-mongering and scaring of people from people with YouTube videos on the internet, which to me really weren't qualified to give an opinion because they didn't work in the industry. I've got 20 years as an intuitive building biologist. So what we did was we went to Canberra to actually go to where 5G was operating. And where we went to was Dixon in the ACT. And those of you who've read our 2 blogs on 5G would be a little bit aware of this. Okay. So what we did when we got there into the actual 5G zone, and some little facts about 5G is that if you're aware or not aware, 5G isn't being broadcast by large 4G mobile phone towers. And it's amazing the amount of people who contact us and say, oh, there's a tower going up down the road, or there's a tower down the road, it's a 5G tower, and they're 4G. And there's even a website out there that says that you can go online and see where your nearest 5G tower is. No, it's not, it's 4G. 5G is being broadcast through LED streetlights, which have a microcell antenna on them. I've got a photo here of one. I just hope it comes through clearly enough. This is a photo of an LED streetlight in Tyre, which is a suburb on the Mornington Peninsula. Now, these streetlights were put up by the Mornington Peninsula Shire, I think about 18 months ago. And I know it's a very blurry photo, but if you look very closely here, you'll see what looks like a little round antenna. That's the microcell antenna. So what they do with 5G is they go into a suburb, and suburbs are delineated by major roads. So, you know, like if you use Google Earth, like I use Google Earth all the time to read different people's properties for radiation issues, like earth radiation lines and bioplasmic radiation, all sorts of things like that. Okay, so the Tyre Council installed these about 18 months ago. That doesn't mean that 5G is up and running. What we require for 5G, as far as the final piece of equipment, is, and I don't know whether this is going to show through, is this photo here, which is, I think, is a repeater. Like the telcos don't give me any information when I talk to them about what is what of what we're seeing. So if you see the streetlights, and then if you see this equipment going up in your area, you know that 5G is either turned on or about to be turned on. Getting back to Canberra, we flew to Canberra, took all of our products to do the testing in a 5G zone. Took my fiance at the time, well, not even a fiance, my partner at the time, Leanne, who's now my wife, and an independent kinesiologist to do kinesiology testing with and without the products. And I did biotensor testing with and without the products. These are intuitive methods of reading energy, and they are far better than using EMF meters. EMF meters can be very misleading, and I was watching a YouTube video yesterday of an English couple in George Street in Sydney using a radio frequency meter to measure what they thought was 5G in Sydney. And I can tell you in that video, even though his radio frequency readings were quite high and they were saying that 5G was turned on, it wasn't turned on. Because through Google Earth, I can read the images, I can read what's going on. So when we got to Canberra, the first thing we found, and as I said, suburbs are delineated by main roads, and so the whole suburb of Dixon, up to its boundaries, had the 5G streetlights installed with the repeaters, and the 5G was operating. So what we found first of all was there's a radiation charge with 5G that comes up vertically out of the ground. It comes up to roughly about 5 feet. When you get that occurring, what happens is that when you have a building in that zone, the radiation charge fully engulfs that building. And I know for a fact from my work that buildings that are full of charge are not healthy buildings. When you have a building that's full of charge, they are buildings where people don't recover from illnesses, or certain things happen, unhealthy cell growth. You know what I'm talking about. That's where the link between radiation and cancer comes in. There are other instances which do cause exactly the same radiation charge outside and inside as what 5G does, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So the streetlights themselves don't broadcast a radiation charge horizontally through the air throughout the whole area. It's only coming up out of the ground. That charge causes a huge amount of electromagnetic stress in the body. And if you've seen our blog where we've got the video of the kinesiology and the biotensor testing of Leanne without the geoclings or the stellar dome harmonizers in place, a lot of her meridians and organs were under quite a lot of electromagnetic stress. Another thing that 5G does is that it activates a set of quite dangerous Earth magnetic grid lines. And Earth radiation is something that, as a building biologist, I know to be a big problem if you have some of these wider Earth magnetic grid lines running through your house. They can be big health issues. And there are different types of Earth magnetic grid lines, and I won't go into them, but we'll save that for another blog where we've got our act together with our Zoom, maybe on another Friday afternoon. Anyway, what we did find is that a particular type of Earth magnetic grid line is activated with 5G. We're aware of those Earth magnetic grid lines because they are activated by other energetic situations, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. These grid lines are roughly 2 meters wide, and they go vertically up into the air. And as they get higher, they actually get wider, which is quite an interesting phenomenon. The electromagnetic stress that you experience over the top of the grid line is far worse than the electromagnetic stress you'll experience either side of the grid line, although either side, no matter where, you're going to be under a lot of radiation stress. That grid runs north, south, east, west, and it's roughly 70 meters apart, roughly. That's what I've measured with Google Earth, and we've double checked and triple checked that over time. Another thing we found with 5G is that any natural healthy Earth energy line, which are commonly called ley lines, that's spelled L-E-Y. And if you search the internet, you'll find different people talking about different ley lines, and for example, how in Europe a lot of the cathedrals used to be put over these energetic ley lines to bring the energy within the cathedral or church or whatever up. And by doing that, you increase what I call the resonance or the negative charge, which is a very healthy energy in the churches. These ley lines, some of them are quite wide, for example, around 70 meters wide. That particular ley line grid runs north-south and is 25 kilometers apart. Then there are smaller ley lines which are roughly around 160 meters apart, and they might be 10 to 15 meters wide. If you have a house that is over one of these very healthy ley lines, what will happen is that you will have a radiance which has a very healthy negative charge. There'll be very little electromagnetic stress on the occupants within the house, which would also mean that they would be happier, healthier houses, because electromagnetic stress on our endocrine organs causes hormone imbalances and neurotransmitter imbalances and does have a big effect on our emotional stability or instability. So houses that have ley lines are really good, healthy houses. Our stellar dome radiation harmonizer, which we developed last year, it actually creates or recreates that radiation resonance of a ley line. However, when you introduce 5G into an area where these ley lines are, that healthy radiance, that negative charge from the ley line is totally wiped out. It disappears. And that's going to be a real problem for people who are quite sensitive to energy who may be living over these ley lines, because 1 minute before 5G is turned on, everything's fine, although there are some instances which can interfere with the ley line energy, which I'll talk about again later. They come and turn 5G on, and that ley line healthy radiance is gone, it's disappeared, it's been replaced with a strong radiation charge from the 5G. The same also applies to water bodies. When we were in Canberra doing our testing, after our testing, we decided to head down the road to Belconnen to get some lunch. And we were only told, or Optus, nothing against the telcos, like they've been really good with giving us information, told us, or on their website, had advertised that certain suburbs in Canberra had 5G and some didn't. Oh, sorry, but there were certain that did, and it didn't mention any other suburbs. When we got down to Belconnen for lunch after our testing, we saw that the 5G streetlights were everywhere and they all had repeaters on them, and that the 5G was actually turned on in Belconnen too. Where we had lunch was right next to a little lake. I can't remember the name of the lake. It was quite pretty. And we noticed that the resonance or the healthy negative charge that water bodies, which generally give off, was gone. It was actually, the water was actually giving off a positive charge, which is not healthy water. So any rivers, streams, lakes, any of those nice ponds, water bodies in parklands or whatever, which a lot of people who are sensitive to energy will be able to tune into their energy. With the 5G, it just totally wiped it out. Another thing we observed with 5G is the planetary energy. Now let me explain this. The planetary energy is an energy that flows from north to south and east to west during the day, and at night time it reverses. And that's a very healthy energy when it's flowing correctly, when it's not being interfered with other circumstances such as solar winds that are very high, which I'll talk about later on. So what had happened with the 5G in the 5G areas is that instead of the planetary flow of energy running from north to south and east to west, it had reversed. And from what I know and what I've experienced over the many years is when you see a reversal of the planetary energy, people are emotionally affected, and that's where I start to get all the phone calls. Like people ringing me saying, "Gerard, what the hell's going on here? I woke up this morning feeling like a bus has hit me, or I didn't sleep very well at all. I had some horrific nightmares, all sorts of different instances that generally sensitive people feel, but you don't have to be on the sensitive side to be affected or feel it anyway." And that was quite disturbing to see that the planetary flows reversed, but it was only happening in the 5G zone. Outside of that, everything was fine. Okay, I have been talking about other circumstances that recreate that same situation of what 5G does, which is causing the radiation charge to come out of the ground and cause the activation of the Earth magnetic grid lines, which are normally dormant, which I call the activated grid, and the reversal of the planetary flow. And this is important information for a lot of people because a lot of the YouTube videos I've seen on the internet talk about why 5G is being a military weapon. I don't think it's a military weapon. Our digital TVs are a military weapon. 5G is just, in a sense, what the telcos believe what we need because as we know, take today, for example, everyone's in lockdown, everyone's at home, everyone's using their Wi-Fi, everyone's using the bandwidth, and your 4G slows down. So the whole idea of 5G was to make it nice and fast. That's a nice thing to have, to keep the information flowing, except for what it does energetically. But anyway, getting back to what I was talking about, a lot of what I see on the internet is fear-mongering. They say that 5G is the worst thing we've ever had. We've never had anything like that before. When it comes along, everyone's going to be dropping like flies. The birds are going to be falling out of the air. The bees will be dying everywhere. And I can tell you, when we went to Canberra and did our testing, it was March, there was flowers out, and we observed these things, and there were bees. It wasn't a problem. There were birds flying everywhere. In fact, in the shopping centre area where we were doing the testing, there was a Woolworths, there was a couple of cafes, a 3-storey office building, there was a library, there was lots of people walking around as if nothing was happening. Mind you, those people by the end of the day would be feeling a little bit wiped out and worn down because of being within the 5G field for a prolonged period of time will cause a great deal of electromagnetic stress, which will really, really, really wear you down. So those people at the end of the day would have been getting home going, boy, I had a big day, I'm really wiped out, and time to relax, and I'm still feeling wiped out if you're living in that 5G area. So the 5G, what you've spoken about on the internet by a lot of people, which does create a lot of fear, and that's a big problem too, because fear does cause what they call anxiety cancer. We deal with a lot of practitioners around Australia and overseas who deal with mental health, and a lot of them talk to me about anxiety cancer, and we all often discuss, for example, different patients of theirs, not talking about their patients, but in general, of how they're in fear of this and fear of that, and how they're big time in fear of 5G. And they're in so much fear that are anxious all the time, and that's slowly, really, really wearing the body down. So what I want to talk about now is those other energies that do exactly what 5G does, has been around forever and a day, as long as a man has been walking this earth, from the days of Adam and Eve, so to speak. And they are, first of all, and the number one is when we have a death on a property. It sounds very macabre, but this is something that is a big reality. In my building biology work as a consultant in Melbourne, where I go to people's houses, you would think that I'm going to look at Wi-Fi issues or electrical radiation issues, or issues with transformers on power poles next to houses and mobile phone towers and things like that. It's never that. It's always when there's been a death in a property, and from a death on your land, or before the house was built, or death on the land after the house was built, or in the house, depending on the suburb or how old the suburb or city is. A death creates a very heavy energy, which is an emotional pain body energy of what we call bioplasmic radiation. And the bioplasmic radiation does exactly the same as 5G. It creates a charge, it comes out of the ground about 5 feet above the ground. It activates the activated grid as I talk about it. It reverses the planetary flow through to the boundaries of your property. You go into some of the older cities or around the world, like for example, in Australia, we've got Launceston, which is the oldest city in Australia. As you walk through the centre of Launceston, through amongst all these really, really old buildings, which have had a long history, there's been a lot of deaths. And so in Launceston, for example, and I'm not picking on it, because of the amount of people and the age of the city and the amount of deaths, it's a virtual 5G environment and always has been. I can fix that radiation charge with the bioplasmic radiation of the geoclines and the stellar dome. It's something that became a very big, obvious problem to us many, many years ago, and we worked very hard to find what is called the correct counter frequency to the energy of the bioplasmic radiation. Another example of another type of energy that is similar to, if not worse than 5G, is when we have very high solar winds. And there is a website that I go to every day, every morning. The first thing I look at when I get out of bed, and I start work at 7 in the morning, or 7:30, is spaceweather.com, and it shows the solar wind speed and it updates it every hour. Excuse me. And if the solar wind speeds happen to be around the 500 to 600 kilometres per second, that is, when a sunspot from the sun is directly facing us, the Earth, there is solar radiation, which is beta gamma, which has an effect on the Earth, which also causes a radiation charge to come out of the ground, just like 5G. However, the higher the wind speed, the further out of the ground that charge can come. And over the last 3 to 4 weeks, which is interesting timing with what's going on around the world with the virus and lockdowns and whatever, we've had some quite high solar winds where I've measured the charge out of the ground to twice as high as what 5G will be creating. That means that when we have these high solar winds, the entire planet is in a 5G environment. And some people are really shocked when I tell them that. They think, oh, no, that can't be right. But that is true. That's what's going on. The sensitive ones, again, when that's going on, they're on the phone to me. What's going on? I had a bad night, having a bad day. I feel completely wiped out. That is because when we have the high solar winds, with that charge coming out of the ground, again, it reverses the planetary flow, activates that dangerous grid, and when you go into a building, the whole building is full of charge. Another type of energy, which is also coming from outside you in, is when we have retrogrades. And everyone knows about Mercury Retrograde. Everyone talks about Mercury Retrograde. A lot of people I know have calendars with all the Mercury Retrograde dates marked in it. And it's a case of taking every day as it comes with Mercury Retrograde, because some days you can have a very high charge coming out of the ground, twice as bad as 5G. And on other days, you may not have anything. What can work against and be a benefit, in a sense, is if there is other astrological events going on at the time when there's high solar winds or retrogrades, which can and may have a balancing effect, and we do see that. I've had some people say to me, oh, okay, when Mercury goes into retrograde from beginning to end, we're going to have a greater charge in the air because of it. But no, that can fluctuate from time to time. I've just got a question come up from Karen Winter. How are you, Karen? About 5G also affecting Schumann resonance. Schumann resonance is created by the resonance from all the lightning strikes, which resonates between the D layer of the ionosphere and the Earth's crust. What happens there is it creates a nice negative charge frequency, which is planetary. But that also is interfered with by the 5G. Good one, thanks, Karen. And also the retrogrades and the high solar winds. Just going back to my notes, and someone else is handing notes to me here. There's a bit of activity going on around here. Okay, so they're examples of other natural phenomena which occur and have been occurring year in, year out for a long, long period of time that is as bad or as, if not worse than 5G. So what I'm getting to is, with all this fear around 5G, a lot of it is unfounded. Yes, it is a radiation danger. However, we can fix it with harmonisers. We've done the testing. But it's not the worst thing that's ever happened. There are other things that come and go, as I've just mentioned then, that do create the same effect. Another thing to add to that too is that lately I've been doing a lot of research into what energies are like in commercial buildings and industrial buildings. I've been doing a lot of visiting commercial sites just doing my own little private surveys, and not involving anyone, doing a lot of work using Google Earth to look at industrial and commercial buildings. And what I've found in the end, there, in an industrial or a commercial building, there's a radiation charge very, very similar to what you get from bioplasmic radiation from a death. However, it's throughout all industrial commercial buildings, and it's not to say that someone's died in every building, like things happen here and there. However, both commercial and industrial buildings have the same energetics, which is the whole entire building is engulfed with radiation charge. And if you have any outside spaces within the boundaries of the buildings, the radiation charge comes to that high above the ground. Another one, again, another good example of that is schools. People are always asking about schools. You know, do we have something to help the school children to protect them from? First of all, they say Wi-Fi, thinking that Wi-Fi is the biggest radiation danger in schools, but it's not. Schools basically are commercial sites. And so what happens with the schools have a radiation charge that comes to that high out of the ground outside, and within every classroom there's a radiation charge that fills every classroom, which might explain why, you know, in some schools, some kids have problems with a bit of bullying here and there, and the bullies could be reacting to the energies, which is having an effect on their endocrine organs, which is having an effect on their hormones, their neurotransmitters, and it's making them upset, angry, aggressive, you name it, it goes on like that. So there's another really good example of schools being the same energetic environment of 5G. I'm just going to go to chat here because I've got a few questions coming in from people. Just be patient for a sec. Not all the questions are coming up. Here's an interesting one from Susan. Do you think that the powers that be have deliberately hyped it up to create fear? Absolutely. They're the greatest fearmongers around. Look at what's going on now. You know, we're going to be in lockdown. They're saying now till for 6 months. Like, does he have a crystal ball? Does he know what's going to happen in 6 months' time? Very good question. But you don't need powers that be to create fear-mongering. There are a lot of people who just love doing it I call it just sick people, that they're not being very grounded. I've got another question here from Clara in the UK. I know Clara well, she's great. She wanted me to talk about hospitals. Well, hospitals, there's another really, really good example of radiation charge throughout the whole hospital, which is exactly the same as what 5G does. We know what happens in hospitals. It's pretty self-explanatory. You know, people die. Lots and lots of people die. And that's a bioplasmic charge which comes from the emotional pain body at the time of death. If we were all meditating Indian yogis and understood how to die in what they call Maha Samadhi, that radiation charge from someone dying wouldn't occur. You get the opposite, you get a radiance from that, but we're just not all there with any of that anyway. Okay, I'll just go on to some more questions which have come in over the last few days. And the top one is a really interesting one I've got on my list here from quite a few people, is 5G in relation to COVID-19. That's a really interesting one. Like, we're not allowed to make any medical claims. We're not really allowed to comment on things like that. We're not doctors per se. But when the first YouTube videos started to come out connecting 5G to COVID-19 in Wuhan, I just didn't buy it at first because of a couple of things. The bioplasmic charge in there in Wuhan, from what the city and China in general has experienced over a millennium, is so strong that when they turned 5G on in Wuhan, it wouldn't have been a case of, oh, I can feel the 5G. It would have been a case of, oh, I've got 5G on my phone. It would have been no difference. But what has come from it is And there are a few doctors on the internet with some, I think, some really good YouTube videos where they talk about the connection between 5G, which is radiation, and viruses and what goes on with the bronchioles and the lungs and the heart and everything, and the immune system. What they're saying that 5G does, I'll agree, but also what I will say is for 20 years I've been saying that all forms of radiation do the same thing. Different radiation fields which have charge, which cause electromagnetic stress in the body, will all operate at different frequencies. And as a medical intuitive, and when I read someone's organs intuitively as to which radiation fields are causing which organs to go into electromagnetic stress. Let's say, for example, bioplasmic radiation may be 3 or 4 organs, and 5G might be 4 or 5 organs, and digital TV might be 2 or 3 or 5 or 6, because if we knew what comes out of digital TV, which is a radiation charge in front of the screen, it's probably the most harmful appliance in the house, and we're totally unaware of that. If you want to talk a little bit about 5G, digital TV, back in 2008, I contacted the Digital Rollout Corporation in Canberra and told them what I found, and they didn't like me talking about that and threatened to sue me for slander if I talked about it in public, which I talk about all the time, because people need to know that what they're sitting in front of, directly in front of every day or every night, is putting them under quite a lot of electromagnetic stress. Okay, we got 5:05, got 10 minutes left. Let's go to some other questions that have come in over the last couple of days. A lot of the questions are about the products, but I don't want to emphasise the products. You can go online and have a look at the products on the website and go and read our blogs. There's a lot of good information there. There's a lot of actually strange questions, but anyway. Okay, here's a really good question from Annette, asking, has the GeoCleanse home device, has it been updated for 5G? The very first GeoCleanses we made in 2004 would have handled 5G. Because the GeoCleanse has an earth pin, it energizes the earth wire with the frequencies and takes it into the ground, and that spreads through the ground. And because 5G comes up out of the ground, the counter frequency of the earth wire being energized, putting that frequency into the ground, neutralizes the 5G. So if you've got older GeoCleanses, don't panic. You don't need to upgrade them for 5G. However, we have done upgrades in the last couple of years for things like, or 5 years actually, in the last 5 years, for being able to perfect and keep a house clear of the radiation charge from planetary retrogrades and high solar winds. We noticed that quite a few years ago, and we were not prepared for it because we weren't aware of it. And when we became aware of it, we endeavoured to actually do something about it. I'll just go back to some more questions. As I said, this is the first time we've done one, so just be with us as we do more and more webinars. I'd like to be able to do them on Friday afternoons. This is a great way to finish off the week. It's like what I say, Poets Day. Here's another question. If we can minimise the effects of 5G at all times with your products, even when we're out and about, that's where our Stellar Dome comes in. That's a great product in your handbag or in your school bag or whatever. What we've noticed with the Stellar Dome is as soon as you walk into a building, it clears the building of all charge. And we've done some experiments where we've known of some commercial developments which have had deaths in them, done the survey beforehand, walked in with a Stellar Dome in my pocket, walked out and then reassessed the building and found that the bioplasmic charge has been completely dissolved, is what I call, because it's anything that's a radiation imprint can actually be removed, as opposed to something that's constantly fed. So for example, your meter box smart meter is constantly fed with electricity, so it's always going to create a charge field around it, unless the power is turned off. The dangerous Earth magnetic grid of the Fisher grid, which is a set of what we call fissures, which are fault lines in the ground. And a fault line is under compression, so anything that's under compression creates a charge above it, like that, which is radiation. The fault lines, so the fissures have water in them, so they become a water vein that makes them more dangerous depending on what's in that water within the fissure. They are also another grid that run north, south, east, west, and they're 70 metres apart. They're always creating that charge. So you can neutralise the fissures with a harmoniser, but as soon as you remove the harmoniser, then the charge comes back immediately. I'll just go back. We're getting so many questions coming in. That's great. I really appreciate everyone's input here. As I said, sorry for the shonky start. We were going to have a little pre-run before we started, but that just didn't get a chance to happen. Oh, that's another time. Sorry, mate. Someone here is asking about electric underfloor heating, which is not really something that you see. I see in a lot of houses these days, but is becoming more and more popular. Electric underfloor heating is not a great one because the entire floor itself has a charge through it. And if you walk on that floor, especially barefooted, your reflexology points under the underside of your feet are going to be under electromagnetic stress, which is going to have a debilitating effect on a lot of the meridians in the body. And it's going to really drain your body. Again, a harmoniser will actually fix that. Okay, we got 5 minutes left to finish up. A lot of the questions I'll tell you now from people over the last few days is all about 5G and coronavirus. 5G and coronavirus is the amount of fear that's been created around that is just phenomenal. At first I was saying, not really, but okay, yes, for sure, radiation does cause an effect on your meridians, which will have an effect on your immune meridian, which runs across here, which is your thymus gland. People who have other viruses in the body, or if they've got autoimmune diseases, or if they're just not well, we often observe their immune meridian just hanging in the balance, just not really giving the right amount of energy. Add radiation charge to that, and then the immune meridian is very, very low on energy. And that's not good for our health and well-being at all. Okay. There's a few people asking about the photos. Next time we do a Zoom, we'll have our screen sharing sorted out. We just didn't get the right amount of practice myself. That's my fault beforehand. But a lot of the photos I was going to show you are actually on our 5G blogs, so don't worry too much about that. Just also while we're talking about streetlights too, just something else which I observed a few years ago. A lot of the talk around with the 5G is going into LED streetlights. But around here, we live in Frankston South in Victoria. We noticed about 5 or 6 years ago that would have been probably Vic Roads replaced a lot of the sodium globes, which are the highway lights, and we have the Nepean Highway running not far from us here, were all upgraded and replaced. And I remember 5 years ago looking up at one of these sodium globes and seeing 2 round circles below them. One of them was just an indentation. The other one was a red cone. I remember looking up and thinking, what the hell's that? And what is it? I had no idea, because 5 years ago there was no talk of 5G at all. It's only been in the last probably 2 to 3 years. I've now realised that those sodium globe lights are also will be 5G capable, because that little red cone underneath is a microcell antenna. And if you've been doing your research like I have been, another use for 5G will be for the driverless cars in the future. You know, there's street lights everywhere, following virtually every major road, every side street, in every city around the world. And the whole idea is, instead of us being able to be responsible enough to drive our cars, technology will be driving our cars for us, which is a very interesting one. Is that a human rights one too? We're not responsible enough to drive safely, so someone else is going to do it for us. It's like we're being spoken to by like naughty little school children, as certain politicians have been talking to us over the last couple of weeks, which is being a little bit annoying to a lot of people around. We deserve a little bit more respect than that, considering we pay their wages and their taxes. So that's 514. Thanks everyone for being part of it. Sorry it didn't go as smoothly as we planned. We'll hope to do another webinar in, let's say, a couple of weeks' time maybe. I might recover 5G, go back over 5G again, and we'll get our act together with our photos. But there's always another subject to talk about. If you've been watching our website and the blogs, there's been a recent blog about mold and vaulted ceilings, which is really interesting. It's another energetic issue in our houses that people are totally not aware of. For example, mold in roof cavities can cause a radiation charge that comes down that some people who are very, very, very sensitive can feel. And we've had a situation recently where someone thought it was actually Wi-Fi when it wasn't. So great, thank you everyone for attending, and hope to be able to do this again in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.